Good morning and welcome to the show. This is Choosing Life, Addiction and Recovery, and this is Suzi Marsh from the Alliance Center. If you would like a copy of the tapes of the show or any previous show, you may call 404-897-7400, extension 2203. Again, that number is 404-897-7400, extension 2203. And today in the studio, we have Marianne Williamson, who I'm very excited to say is going to talk about a whole nother level to recovery, and that is the level of moving beyond our small community and our society and looking at the world, kind of as she and I discussed during the break, maturity into recovery. So welcome, Marianne.
Thank you so much.
And this new book you've written, The Healing of America, it's fascinating. The way you talk about it also is fascinating. It sounds like it's time for us to kind of move out of our narcissism with our healing and our recovery, especially people who've been doing it for a while, and really take a look at what's happening in the world and politics. And you're so right. Nobody wants to talk about that. How boring. So why don't you say how that happened to you, that you got that involved in this?
Well, I think self-awareness is obviously very important, and it is not inherently a narcissistic pursuit. But I think that what adolescence represents is a stage of maturity after which we move out of a self-centered, childish model of thought and behavior into one that is more concerned with the larger world. And I think of the transformational community, including in some ways recovery movement, as having reached collectively a kind of adolescent level in which we can participate in a rite of passage that moves us beyond concern with merely our own individual healing to a point where we're ready to take what we have learned and what we have gained and practice it, as it were, on the larger world.
What do you think happens to people when they get in recovery? And sometimes I think they get so involved in their own healing process that they do tend to forget that. And it's like, I don't want to deal with this other stuff. It's so boring. How do you think people move from that? How do you think they start to care, be more empathetic and concerned with other people's feelings and the community?
Well, first of all, I don't want to be perceived here, because I'm not in any way invalidating the recovery and personal healing process. Not only is it all important, but I do think that there are times in all our lives where it pretty much takes up the whole radar screen because it has to. So I'm not in any way invalidating that, and I don't want to be perceived as mocking it in any way. However, I think there comes a time in the process, through the cycles and the seasons of life, where you don't get moved by someone or something else, but are rather impelled by your own nature, by the processes of God within us, to recognize that having achieved what we've achieved and received the blessings that we've received, it's time to give those things away in order to keep them. Now, obviously,
like the 12 steps.
Absolutely. You stay sober by helping to give faith and inspiration by those who are trying to get sober. And that's all I'm talking about here. When we feel that God has helped us in our own lives, there's not a price we pay, but a gift we give back.
Right.
And that is that we try to apply what we've learned and to give what we've been given.
Yeah, and I didn't see you as mocking it at all. I think I was just trying to help people understand that sometimes people will hear, well, gosh, we have to do this now. They don't really see how it's going for us. And I think that, I remember for myself early on in my own journey of taking a look at so many things and family members going, what are you doing? What are you focusing on? And it's so hard for people to see early on. You have to be that self-absorbed.
Yes. And then that time changes,
right.
though.
Right.
I was saying to you before that I feel a lot of people in the transformational community look at a book called The Healing of America. I talk about the intersection of spirituality and politics in this book. And, the attitude that a lot of people have is, do we have to talk about politics?
It's true.
And
it's true.
Basically, the answer is yes. From my point of view, and for the following reason. The ancient Greek root of the word politics does not mean of the government, it means of the citizen. Imagine if there were an American paradise, and there's a wall with a door in it that separates us from the American paradise. There's one major group of people in this country who would say paradise doesn't exist, it's a ridiculous concept, and there is no door. Then there is another group of people who believe in the concept of an American paradise. They believe in the concept of a society that works, where people are happy, where creativity flows. And they've done all they could to find the door, and they might have even found the door, but they can't find the keys. They might be real committed to the search, but they haven't found the keys. Then I think there's another group of Americans, and I think we're it, who absolutely know that paradise exists, absolutely know that there is a realm of happiness, creativity, productivity, and peace. We not only know where the door is, but we actually have the keys. But we're so busy talking about the keys and looking at the keys and being concerned with how beautiful the keys are that we haven't yet thought to actually use them to open that door. And that's what I think it's time to do.
That was very, very accurate, I think.
I'm a writer. I wrote it in my book.
It's very good. It's true. Well, let me just
write that down.
Let me just read this that you wrote, because what you said was so perfect. I was telling her kind of about how the show focuses on recovery, and I thought it was fascinating. Those of you that are involved in 12-step programs will love this. And this is in her book, again, The Healing of America. And she says, within the next 10 years, America will have a renaissance or a catastrophe. Something is going to happen to take us back to who we are. If America were an individual, this is perfect. Seeking counseling, a good therapist might say, number one, you're not really sober. Number two, you're obsessed with material things and your spiritual life is begging for attention. Number three, you rarely take responsibility for your own problems and project a lot of your blame onto other people. Isn't that exactly true for us and for America? Number four, you've neglected your kids. That's so true. Number five, the size of the elaborate security system around your house shows paranoid tendencies. Number six, you have a lot of amends to make. Number seven, your attraction to generals is neurotic. This is perfect. And whether the patient takes the cue or not remains to be seen. But for a person or for a nation, everything will erupt in time if we do not attend to the inner life. You're right. Everything you said is accurate. We have the keys, and I don't want to go apply them, though. That's the truth. And you're right. It is laziness. It's like I'm enjoying this calm after years of storm, and it's like, well, okay, what do we have to do?
But you know what? I got to tell you something. Energy is born of participation. I mean, you say, I'm too tired to act, but really the truth is you're tired because you're not acting. I'll give you an example. I read in the paper the other day. I don't know, when is this program going to be?
Hopefully in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay.
The weekend after you speak, I believe.
All right. Well, on October 6th, NASA is planning to launch something called the Cassini mission. Have you heard about it? The Cassini mission is a mission to Saturn, which carries on it 72 pounds of plutonium. Now, if there's an accident upon re-entry and any plutonium is released, anywhere from several 100,000 to 1 million or 2 people could die of cancer. So a lot of us feel very strongly in the anti-nuclear movement and elsewhere about trying to get this mission stopped. There has recently been a former safety personnel named Alan Cohn from NASA who is speaking out on this issue, and many other scientists have as well, saying we must stop the Cassini mission. Plutonium being sent into outer space is absolutely insane. What's happening here, of course, is that there are portions of the nuclear industry which are basically looking for new markets. We could do this mission on solar power. So I had read this, and part of what my book is concerned with is taking citizen action. It's not that people have taken away our political power, it's that we don't exercise it, we don't use it. And democracy will not survive if we have this continued diminished participation in it. So, in fact, out of 163 democracies, the United States ranks about 140 in democratic participation. While everybody else in the world is so excited because they're now a democracy and are rushing to participate, we're sitting here taking it for granted,
fat and lazy.
Unravel. Absolutely. So before I came here, I was very tired because I had to get up very early this morning. I had to get up very early yesterday. But I had not yet called my congressman and called my senators to make a constituent call to say, stop the Cassini mission. So I had I had said on a radio show earlier, call your senators, call your congressmen, tell them if you feel this way, you want to see the Cassini mission launch stopped. And what I write about in my book and what I've learned is that if there are 200 phone calls that go into a federal congressperson's office, this is a major political factor. So just before I came here about an hour ago, I did that. I called my congressman's office. I come from California. I called Senator Boxer's office. I called Senator Feinstein's office. There's a switchboard number, for instance, and the Capitol switchboard is 202-224-31 to one. You just call up, they say Capitol Switchboard, you say Representative Cap's office or Senator Boxer's office or whatever. You say, this is so-and-so, I come from such and such a place, and I want to register a constituent opinion. They say, yes, please give it to us. And you tell them. Now, I did that with 2 senators before I came here and 1 congressperson, and I got to tell you, I woke up. I totally was not tired anymore. And that's exactly what the Course in Miracles says, too. It says you're tired, not because you haven't rested, but because you're resting through things you shouldn't be resting through. So I noticed that. I thought, God, just doing that, taking that action, expressing my power. We're tired, not because we've been expressing our power so much that we need to rest. We're tired because we're not expressing our power. And at a certain point, if you are an adult and you're not acting like one, you cannot feel good about yourself.
Well, I hate what you're saying because it's true. It's very true. Oh, my higher power, why'd you make me come here and listen to this? Because I won't be able to hear it without doing something.
Are you going to call and say you want to stop the
will.
Cassini mission? It's insane.
It
plutonium
is.
in outer
sickening.
space.
It's scary. It's very scary to hear that. And what's scary is the fact that you're right, and I've known these things and just kind of let them gnaw at the back of my brain and think, well, next year I'll do something because of this. Next year I'll do
let me
something.
ask you a question. How many people do you know who've had brain tumors?
I think 2.
Okay, you've known 2 people who had brain tumors. When you were a kid, when have you known?
Zero.
Zero. Thank you very much.
I was thinking of the same thing with
AIDS
cancer.
Is not, absolutely. AIDS is not the epidemic of our times. Cancer is the epidemic of our times. And it is off the charts. You and I have 300... it's grown 300% in the last 30 years. So putting things like, every time we do something environmentally insane and toxic, like putting plutonium into outer space, the self-destructiveness of the human race to do something like this is so outrageous. But if we don't even complain, that's what Jefferson said. Jefferson said that only a spirit of rebelliousness can keep American democracy alive. We are acting, this generation has begun to act more like the royalists during the early days of the United States than like the people who fought the Revolutionary War. We're just sitting here letting all these things be done to us. This is a lot more dangerous than taxing us for tea. And we're just saying, well, I don't know, I'm shopping, I'm busy, I'm thinking,
you're right.
I'm watching TV,
I'm sorry, I'm speechless because you're right, and it's disgusting. It's truly disgusting. And when I look at my life, what it's like now, and think about how little, I do some volunteer work, but it's like so little compared to what...
Well, you now have the number of the Capitol Switchboard. And
Not
if you're
only
a
that,
good girl, I'll give you the number of the White House, and then you'll really get started.
And not only that, we'll write these numbers down, but I have a list.
By the book, you see it's in the book.
I have a list that somebody gave me about a year ago of all of our reps and congressmen and people to call, and I still have it. So,
put it on your refrigerator.
There's a reason to do that. So let's talk more about the book. And you were telling me a little bit earlier about another portion of your book that described sobriety and abstinence and drug addiction and how we're like a drunk. Our society is like a drunk or an addiction.
Well, what I was talking about there was about
intervention.
The main economic forces being acting like drunk. They're drunk on power. But
that's true.
But the thing that you and I had been talking about before that actually was this notion of the idea that America has become a legally ordained drug culture.
Right.
I think it's very disturbing the way Americans... If a drug is illegal, it's called a drug in America. If it's legal, it's called a medication. It's all language. So whereas we used to say, do you know where I can get a gram? We now say, so-and-so thinks I should be on medication. It's unbelievable, really. When I was a kid, the kids brought home the drugs. Today, the parents bring home the drugs. It's unbelievable how parents drug their children in America today. And then we say, but the doctor told me I should. So doctors, I think medical doctors are the biggest drug pushers in America. If you want to know where the biggest drug stash is, look at our collective medicine chests. And so the epidemic use of antidepressants, which is not to say that they never have a place, because I'm sure that they do. But as I have gone around the country, I am just appalled at how easily we will drug our children. And of course, a pharmaceutical company making billions of dollars off antidepressants is called a genuine capitalist concern, an authentic, reasonable capitalist concern. But someone who suggests that we try a genuine spiritual life as primary treatment for depression is liable to be called a snake oil salesman in today's climate.
Well, that's very true. It is. And, the thing that is so scary when I work with teenagers is so many parents that have never really parented their children are the ones who really want chemicals, and they certainly don't want to hear me talk about their behavior
Absolutely.
with their child and what they've done.
And the food they're giving their children.
And why their kid is so angry at them.
Thank you very much.
And that part is very sad.
And of course, it all works. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It all works for the incipient forces of oppression, because this is absolutely not the time in America to not be in touch with the part of yourself that says, this really stinks. So how perfect for a system which is in some ways in the midst of dismantling our basic democratic freedoms to have so many of us on Prozac that we feel fine no matter what.
Oh, that's so sad. And, I have to say, because I'm a therapist, there is a percentage of people that legitimately have a mental illness.
Oh, and I agree with
medication.
that, and thank you for saying it. And I don't mean to be irresponsible here, nor do I even feel. No, I'm glad that you said it, though, because I know that is true. I know that there are times when it's very valid to take pharmaceutical
but to use
drugs.
It for parenting, which
yes,
so many parents
as a substitute for parenting or for education,
that goes straight back
or discipline.
To exactly. Usually it's discipline, Depakote or something for anger.
The kid's a problem child, so let's just dope him up.
And many times they're on drugs, which is why they're angry, or something has been happening in the family that they don't want to listen to or talk about at all. So it's fascinating to think of, and I think I mentioned earlier there was a book written about 10 years ago that talked about this, and I was so excited about it, and then everybody went to sleep.
Yeah, but it's just waves that have to keep coming around again to start a new conversation. It'll happen. I mean, we're doing it.
And in the 60s, it was so exciting to be in college at the tail end of this, in 1976, the tail end of all the movement, and go to marches and do things. And but they were so they were so poorly attended compared to what I remembered watching on TV. And it was so exciting when I went to the University of Alabama. There was a Klan resurgence or something. I don't know what it was, but I remember marching, but it was still so small compared to what I would see when I was a little kid and go, wow, look at that on TV. Wow, that's wonderful.
Well, I was part of the 60s generation, and it's true. We used to sing All You Need Is Love at political rallies. The 60s was the last time that we infused our politics with genuine idealism. But, that's even sobriety is an issue there, because really what I believe what's coming back in the form of a kind of social revolution in the 90s is very much what the 60s was about, except this time we're sober. I mean, we accomplished pretty much in the 60s stone, so think what we can do mature and sober.
That is great. That's great. That's wonderful. I love it. So it is like the maturity, because just running around talking about it now, it's like, okay, let's do it. And that's the part that it's so hard to do, and just to get myself to do it, but it's true. And we've only got about 4 or 5 minutes left on this side of the show before we take a break. So let's talk a little bit more about your book. In The Healing of America, when you talked about the return to the first principles of our founding fathers, you may have said that, but is that the principles of activism and being rebellious? Is that?
No, actually. First principles of American democracy, and President Thomas Jefferson said in 1801 that we should make periodic recourse to first principles. Because when you have periodic recourse to first principles, you remember where the country is supposed to be. They are the things on which we have agreed to agree. They are the principles which don't get brought up for a vote. They are the principles which are pre-established. Number one, equality. The idea of the equal rights, equal opportunities. Number two, unity in diversity. You're Catholic and you're American. You're gay and you're American. You are Jewish and you're American, meaning your diversity, where you are unlike others, is to be respected, and yet your unity with others is to be equally respected. Third first principle, exceedingly important, is the idea that it is the function of the United States government to simultaneously protect the general good, yet also with enough checks and balances to secure individual liberty. Now, we're living at a time where there are dominant political forces that would go on and on and on about individual liberty, mainly economic liberty for a certain group of Americans, and yet very much underemphasize the need for the protection of the common good, education, health care, etc. Then the fourth major first principle is the idea of religious tolerance. Actually, James Madison, the main author of that principle, said that tolerance is not enough, because tolerance still implies judgment. We must do more than tolerate other people's religious and political beliefs. We must actually try to respect them.
I've heard of a saying that has always stuck with me. We need less hate and more curiosity.
Oh, that's brilliant. And I read something somewhere, I think it was Oscar Wilde. I believe it was Oscar Wilde, but it might have been, was an Irish poet, who said, we have just enough religion in the world to make us hate each other, but not enough religion in the world yet to make us love each other.
I know, and it's the exact opposite of, I think, how Jesus was.
Absolutely.
And Gandhi and Muhammad and Martin Luther King and Krishna and anybody else in any religion. So, you know, there's next door, and you're not from Atlanta, but I don't know if you've heard of Rush Limbaugh. So there's a man next door, Neil Bortz, and he always talks about how the founding fathers didn't believe in equality because they didn't give women the right to vote, nor blacks.
Oh, well, that's a real misinterpretation of
That's
history.
what I think, because of what was happening historically. Of course they didn't, but
of course, and also that's not what they just began a process that they themselves could not complete. It is true that Jefferson had slaves, but that doesn't mean that Jefferson was a hypocrite or that this country is hypocritical. It means that the country is in a process of its own greater becoming. And what politics is meant to be is the process by which we lessen the gap between our ideals and our reality. There have always been forces which would expand the American dream. There have always been forces which would constrict it. Every time we've committed to greater liberty, when we gave women the right to vote, we expanded the dream. When we eradicated slavery, we expanded the dream. When we passed civil rights legislation, we expanded the dream. The issue is not to bitch and moan because you don't think it's expanded enough for you. The job of every generation is to further the expansion. And we're living at a time when there is very potent drive to expand the dream, and there are also very potent drives abroad in America today to constrict that dream.
I have to tell you this. I drive from Rome, Georgia, not every day, but once a week, because I have a radio show there, once a week, and it's an hour and a half, and it's only an hour and a half away from Atlanta, and there's a show that comes on that's the political, total right wing, what do you call them, the David Koresh people, the militants, I can't think of the name.
The militia, the
militia, and they have their own radio shows now. You would not believe what you hear on their shows.
Well, let me tell you something. The issue is, the real problem is not that they're talking, the real problem is that we're not.
And that's the truth. And what's scary is people are always calling in to their shows, and they have this incredible network, and they have, you wouldn't believe what they have.
There's a part in my book where I talk about Morris Dees and the Southern Poverty Law Center and how he's traced. Basically, these organizations have infiltrated all 50 states. There's actually word that in police organizations all over the country, there are paramilitary and militia members who are already in our police forces. But once again, the real problem is that we ourselves are not speaking from a higher place. And also, I think, Martin Luther King Jr. said that we need to have tough minds and tender hearts. A lot of tough-minded people in America obviously need more expanded hearts. But I think in relation to the recovery movement, transformational community in general, we have a lot of open-hearted people who really need to read a book or two. Because fuzzy thinking is just one step above not thinking. And it's real hard to stand up for American first principles and what the founders said if you yourself don't know, because you haven't heard anything about it since the 7th grade and you don't remember. So I think we all have, and that's why I try in my book to give a little, brush-up course on American history. We have a lot to think about now. This is not the time to be asleep in America.
Well, this is fantastic. I mean, I remember thinking it really literally for the last 5 years, the way you're talking, I've been thinking, gosh, I really should be doing a lot more, but it's just so easy to be lazy. And there's no excuse and there's no reason. Everything you're saying is accurate. That the people that I believe the most in the liberal politics and liberal movement is so much the ones that are sitting back, not reading a book, not doing something about it. And I'm guilty of that also myself. So it's so true. We have to wrap up this half of the show. If you will stay tuned, we will be right back with Marianne Williamson. This is Suzi Marsh on Choosing Life, Addiction and Recovery. Remember, this is a public service of WSB 98.5 FM. Welcome back. You are listening to Choosing Life, Addiction and Recovery. This show is a public service of WSB 98.5 FM. Don't forget to get out your pen or pencil in case you need some of the phone numbers, which you will be needing, that we will be giving out at the end of the show. Again, we are talking with Marianne Williamson, and she is talking about maturity and recovery and how that means focusing on your community and the world at large, especially here in the United States, politically, I guess I would not say economically, I would say the world.
Well, economics is a large part of it, actually.
Okay. What do you think is the worst political problem in America today, Marianne?
The worst political problem is our own diminished participation in the political system. As I said before, out of 163 democracies, we rank about 140 in democratic participation. And we complain about power being in the hands of other people, but really that's where our consciousness is. You know, when this country was founded, it was founded on the repudiation of aristocracy as a political system. However, what's happened in terms of our psychological evolution and growth is that although we repudiated aristocracy, we have not yet outgrown the mindset, the aristocratic mindset. So I think that we have subconsciously recreated it. We have turned particularly corporate America into our new aristocracy. Part of their minions have become the government and the media. And the average American acts like a new brand of serf. And the problem is not just that corporate interests have undue influence in a kind of aristocratic way over the workings of government. Every time that any of us just think they have the power and don't even bother to complain or to express moral outrage when we see something we don't like, means that we ourselves have the consciousness of a serf. And that is the root of the problem. And I think that the illness, that talks about why we have the illness. The illness itself, I believe, is that the entire ethos of the United States at this point has become money as a bottom line. The real axis is no longer between left and right, not really, although the dominant political system would have us think it is. The real axis that matters is between those who would organize society along economic principles versus those who would organize society according to humanitarian principles. And we, I believe, need to stand up without apology, without timidity, and call that for what it is. And say, as long as money is the bottom line, not only in American society, but surely in the way we run our government and make our basic decisions, then this country will continue in the direction it's going. And despite government PR to the contrary, I think that direction is downward.
Well, what you just said was incredible. The way you used the words even to describe it, a new type of serf, I think it's very accurate. I find myself feeling timid around people that feel the opposite of the way I do politically.
Oh, yes, you're totally invalidated if you speak. And I'd like to talk about that also in a moment.
Without timidity. I can't believe you said that. I was like, that's
Absolutely,
right.
Because what happens is that there's a fashionable cynicism in America that's completely based on head rather than heart. And what it does is to trivialize, mock, marginalize anybody with a love-centered, compassion-centered, service-centered, love-centered message. It's interesting because I think since Princess Diana's death, I think one of the positive outcomes of this tragedy is that it will be hopefully a little less easy to mock those with a love-based message. You know, when Princess Diana was alive, she said that she felt the biggest disease in America, no, in the world, obviously. She said in the world was people feeling unloved. While she was alive, she was mocked for that kind of comment. After she died, she was honored for it. Do you know that today there is an article on the front page of the Washington Post? You can't get a more high-powered American newspaper than the Washington Post. On the front page, there's an article about how American teenagers who say they feel loved have lower rates of delinquency, drug addiction, and any other dysfunctional behavior.
And it's the truth. I see it every day in my office.
We've known it was the truth. There's a sociological phenomenon which occurs when you feel that you're not alone in something. And I think what happens for most of us is that we know the heart needs to lead the head. We know that the head leading the heart produces tragedy, produces the wars in Vietnam, things like this. We know this, but when we say it, we become so invalidated. We become so mocked, so like, you know, people roll their eyes and ask, when have you been visiting California or whatever it is. And yet, once you begin to realize that other people feel the same way I do, then, you know, maybe I'm not so crazy, and you become emboldened. And then everybody starts saying it. And that's called social change. That's called social revolution. And that's the social revolution, I think, trying to emerge from the bottom of things in America today.
That was wonderful. I'm sorry I don't have anything to say because what you're saying is answering to something I've been praying about and thinking about for myself. So it's just very, very powerful to hear you talk about it. And it is so easy to go to sleep when you're surrounded by conservatives, and when it seems like sometimes the vogue is the Rush Limbaugh, but anyway, I don't want to.
Well, I want to say something about that, though. Conservatives There's nothing wrong with conservatives. I mean,
There's not?
No, there's really not. And I think in making our own arguments more sophisticated, it's very important. You know, President Eisenhower said the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative.
Right.
Politics at its best is neither liberal nor conservative. Politics at its best, I believe, is a synergistic conversation between high-minded liberal visions for the country and high-minded conservative visions for the country. There are some very high-minded conservatives saying very important, intelligent things, just as there are some pretty low-minded, self-righteous, smug liberals out there, too. So, you know, this idea of demonizing the other side of the political spectrum,
Right.
I mean, what you just said is like what a lot of people, they talk about liberals like we're animals. So I think we really need to move on from that. And even with Rush Limbaugh, as I said before, the problem is not that Rush Limbaugh is talking, the problem is that we're not. This is a democracy, and he's exercising his rights for free speech in a democratic society. I think we're jealous of him. Right?
Yeah.
Because he's talking, because he's using his power. And
That's
I think
true.
we need to imitate him more than childishly demonize him.
And, you know, for those of you that are in recovery, that's always what we hear in a meeting. It's like, you got to go do this. You can't stop being a victim and cry and whine about it.
Right.
Go do it. Get over it.
Right.
You have to do something about it.
Exactly.
So that is true. It's very true. Well, you're speaking in Georgia. Just you have one engagement in Atlanta, rather, right?
Which is tonight, so I suppose that it will be over by the time this tape is on. But
sorry.
Still, people can get the book.
Okay, good. And the book, again, if you just tuned in, is The Healing of America. And we are talking with Marianne Williamson really about taking a look at love and politics and healing the United States and hopefully healing the world. How have your own politics changed over the course of your life, Marianne?
I don't think that my politics have changed so much, but I think since I've had a child, I have a much greater sense of urgency. I think before I had a child, if I would see something that was too upsetting, there was a part of me that would say, oh, well, what the hell? I won't be here in 50 years. What difference does it matter? But when you have a child, your child will, or your child's children will. You take history, I think, more personally when you have children. And also, it's not just that my politics have changed, but that America has changed. I know when I began researching this book, I came to believe that many things are worse than I thought. I didn't know that Marines were roaming border towns of the United States and drug patrols. I didn't know that how much barbarism the United States penal system is already well known for. I didn't know that prison building is the #1 urban industry in America. I didn't know that we have more of our citizens behind bars than any other nation of the world. I didn't know we had hundreds of thousands of children lost without homes in our foster care system. I didn't know we have 36 million people living in poverty in America, which is enough to fill the places of every man, woman, and child in the largest 25 cities in America. I didn't know that 1/5 of America's children live in poverty. I didn't know that 1/2 of all black children live in poverty. I didn't know that every other industrialized Western nation has universal health care and see it as a basic human right. So in researching this book, I learned a lot of things, and I also learned how many things were said by Thomas Jefferson and others of our founders who totally support a radically different vision of America than that which is dominant within our political system now, even expressed by those who claim people like the Founding Fathers as their great heroes.
That's wonderful. What do you think about political labels and such as liberal or conservative and being used as slurs like you and I talked about earlier? It's just so easy to do that. It happens automatically.
Well, as I said before, the real axis that matters is not liberal versus conservative, but the idea of economic values as opposed to humanitarian values. I'm not a conservative. I'm a liberal, but I have great respect for many conservatives that I know, and some of my most interesting political conversations are with them. I mean, God help us when any of us think that we don't have anything to learn from anybody.
How do you respond to someone who says that spirituality doesn't matter, it's irrelevant when you talk about politics?
Well, then if you're going to say that, then I guess Mahatma Gandhi doesn't matter. I guess that Martin Luther King Jr. doesn't matter. I guess that Thoreau doesn't matter. I guess the Quakers who founded Pennsylvania don't matter. The notion that spiritual principle does not belong in the public domain, that's really what the philosophy of nonviolence as expressed by both Gandhi and King repudiated. Martin Luther King Jr. said that the real goal was not the desegregation of the South. That was merely the political externalization of his goal. His ultimate goal was the establishment of the beloved community. And in order to create the beloved community, he said, we need a qualitative shift in our souls as much as a quantitative shift in our circumstances.
Well, what I find fascinating is that he worked so hard, similar to Gandhi, to be nonviolent. But then I remember and hear about studying and remember studying in history. Who was it that said, "I might not agree with what you say, but I would fight to the death for your right to say it"? Was it
Absolutely. That was one of the founders. It was
Jefferson?
Tom Paine. No, it wasn't Jefferson. Paine, maybe, or Hamilton. One of those guys did say that. And also one of the things that Martin Luther King said was, "Thank God God didn't say I have to like my enemies." He said you must love those even with whom you disagree. It doesn't mean you have to like them, but you must love them, and you must respect those with whom we do not disagree, with whom we do not agree. That is a basic of nonviolence. That is a basic core section of nonviolent attitude, that we will awaken the conscience in people. You cannot be a moral persuader with people whom you yourself judge. I mean, what do you really want to do? Do you want to just demonize those who disagree with you politically, or would you like to be able to persuade them in some way to see things the way you do? Because if you're judging them, they can feel that. They can feel it telepathically, even if you don't express it with your behavior. They're not going to have any heart space to be able to hear you. And that's what political dialogue should be. It should be a compassionate, synergistic conversation undertaken by people who have genuine respect for each other. Then people can hear each other, and then there can be real creativity and breakthrough.
That would be incredible. I'm thinking of the show Politically Incorrect. I mean, I'm not sure if that happens on that show.
Oh, well, I've been on that show. Sometimes it happens, yeah. So, the interesting thing about Politically Incorrect is that you never know what's going to happen. But it's interesting you mentioned that. I was watching a television program once. I was going to put this story in my book, and I left it out and then was sorry that I had. It was after the 1994 congressional elections, and Carol Moseley Braun, the senator, very liberal senator from Illinois, was on with Tommy Thompson, the conservative governor from Wisconsin. And they were on a show with John McLaughlin. And obviously, Thompson and Moseley Braun have a lot of mutual respect. And they were having a very interesting conversation. And they kept complimenting each other. They kept deferring to each other, and yet presenting point counterpoint in this synergy that was so fascinating and so educational. It was like, this is so cool. But John McLaughlin couldn't deal with it. John McLaughlin was so invested that for his television show, because the news really isn't about news anymore, it's about entertainment. So what they're trying to do in order to have ratings is to create conflict, right? So this guy, he kept putting a wedge in between Moseley Braun and Thompson, even though they themselves were trying to go, yeah, that's right, and on the other hand, blah, 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 we're really learning. So they spew all this poison of conflict and negativity and disruption into the viewer. And then probably when the show was over, they all went and had drinks and were perfectly charming to each other. It's really disgusting.
John McLaughlin. He's funny. What is this chapter that's called Emerald City? What is that idea about?
Emerald City is the idea of a green city, and that's what Washington, D.C. has become. Basically, what has...
green meaning money or green meaning grass?
Money. Green meaning money.
Okay.
With the way the...
meaning money is what's the most important thing to us nowadays, not anything else.
Meaning that money controls Washington, D.C.
Oh.
The beginning of the chapter reads, "To place money before love is idolatry. That is true for an individual, and it is true for a nation. A nation of idol worshippers always has been, and always will be, struck down. There can be no serious healing of America without looking deeply at the ways in which money runs this country, any more than there can be any serious healing of a wound without treating it. It leads us into areas that are neither fun nor uplifting to consider. Until we do, however, we cannot be true healers of this nation." And then the chapter goes on to discuss basically that corporate interests, as opposed to the people of the United States, for all intents and purposes now own America. But even, once again, going back to the issue of citizen action, the problem is not that a few selfish people decided to steal America. The problem is that we have given her away.
Ugh. First of all, I have to say that is an incredible statement. To place money before love is idolatry.
And that is a branch that will be cut off. There is no fruit there. And that's, once again, going back to the Emerald City image. That's the idea that money can take you home is a lie anyway. By the way, I do want to say this here. Capitalism, American capitalism, has been very good to me. If somebody buys one of my books, I get $1.06 or something like that. So this is not to demonize, to childishly demonize either capitalism or American corporate structure.
Good point.
It is to argue not with corporations, but with their undue influence on the American political system. But once again, if nobody else is trying to influence it, what are you going to get?
Well, this is so wonderful. I mean, it's the same point over and over that I just have to keep saying out loud, that I can't complain and be a victim if I'm not doing anything about it. And it's so easy to do that when Dr. Laura or Rush Limbaugh or Neil Bortz or somebody like that is so angry and so aggressive and so abrasive. It's much easier to do that out of jealousy than it is to say, well, I think I'll do this. I think I'll try this on my show, or I think I'll do, and have the guts to do it. And who cares what happens? I'm just going to do it. Without timidity. It's incredible.
Or
I have to act. Or apology.
No American should have to feel embarrassed, nor should any American feel embarrassed to say, I take this stance or that stance because my heart feels it. That's why I take this stance. My heart feels it.
Well, that makes me want to cry. It truly does, because I have secretly hidden a lot of things out loud because it's like mocked. And
they'll laugh at me, they'll invalidate me. I'm the only one who feels this way.
I honestly feel like
and
crying.
that's what they want you to think.
That's
what
apologize.
They want you to think. They're thrilled that you think that.
And I know, like, I don't know that. I'm a therapist, but it just never
but
occurred
once again,
to me.
That's the drunk aspect, though. It's like the dominant economic interests in America act like a drunk. They deny, they justify, they swagger, they intimidate, and we're so codependent. We're so codependent. We go along with it.
We
need a national Al-Anon movement to see that the major economic forces in America, we need a political intervention in this country.
I have to say, this woman is so small. She's so teeny, and she's like so powerful.
Short girls rule, and don't forget that.
Short girls rule. I bet you were fun 20 years ago when I was partying anyway. I'm kidding.
We might have known each other. Who can remember?
That's hilarious. So that's so wonderful to think of it that way. It's swaggering because it's intimidating, and I think they must be right.
Right.
That was what my dad believed,
exactly,
so they must.
Exactly. It's like an alcoholic in the house, and so we just go and we hide in the corner.
And it's so funny because my dad now, who was like this big, tough conservative, now is like totally into the Deepak Chopra movement.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Calling
my
me
father
up.
was reading Celestine Prophecy before he died.
Calling me up, telling me, what do you think about this workshop? You want to go do this? And I was like, is this my father?
Exactly. Now let's look at this really seriously.
Okay.
Do you see why it's such an incredible moment of opportunity? Do you see why we have a moment of opportunity here we didn't even have 5 years ago? It's because people like your father, this is our time. State it now. Sound the tuning fork.
You know what else? What makes sense is what happened to him is, like many men in his 70s, late 70s,
Prostate.
is he had a heart attack or something like that. Anyway, he ended up having a bypass, decided to change his entire life
Right.
because what was missing?
Right.
Love.
That's right.
Busy working and had no idea about all 5 kids, what they were like.
I'm telling you, America is ripe. We do not have to create a love-based impulse. We just need to harness the love-based impulse.
Okay, I want to focus on that for the last part of the show, because what my argument in my head is, it's too hard, it's too difficult. Let's talk about hope. Let's talk about the fact that there is a place, this is the time. For example, if there was ever a good example, it would have been my dad, going from what he used to be like to what he's like now. So let's talk about what's hopeful. Give us some hope on this, Marianne. How do we know? I know one thing we can do is make phone calls, but give us more hope that there's Give us more hope that there's things and ways for it to happen.
Well, hopefully my book is a book of hope about what we could do. I talk in the book about something I call holistic politics, and something I call citizen salons. And I suggest that we get together with people once a week, just like we know from...
What?
Citizen salons, I call it. It's like the political equivalent of, let's say, an AA meeting. The idea that you join in fellowship, that you join with other people.
Okay.
And if you had a citizen salon, let's say you meet with 2 or 3 people once a week, and you open the meeting with a prayer or visualization, meditation, asking that we be used in the service of a great social revolution that will make us a love-centered society. And then every person there brings, let's say, one article that they read in the newspaper or in a magazine that week about something that they find very, such as I mentioned before about the Cassini launch carrying plutonium into outer space, the assault on America's food supply. We have hormones in our milk and cheese that the Europeans wouldn't allow their children to get even close to. It is unbelievable how the Food and Drug Administration has once again bought and sold by corporate interests, rather than even when Adam Smith, the whole concept of capitalism was meant to be taking the monopoly set up by the king and the English aristocracy out of the hands of the aristocracy, out of the privileges away from the producers into the hands of the consumers. But now we have a system which is so tilted in the direction of service to the producer rather than the consumer. So there are so many areas on any given, if you just said, okay, I'm going to read the front page or the op-ed page of one good newspaper a day, it'll take you 10 minutes to just look over it, you're going to end up seeing newspaper articles and go, wow. You take it out, then you have your citizen salon, you're meeting every Sunday afternoon for an hour, Thursday nights, whatever, and you read these articles together and see how you feel. And then you make your commitment to the citizen salon that you're going to make some act of lobbying. And once again, in my book, I go through how you do that. The Capitol switchboard, you simply call. You say, this is a constituent call. You feel so empowered. I have this whole section in my book about a constituent call to Senator Feinstein's office. You write a letter, you make a phone call, you write an op-ed piece. There are so many things we can do to make a difference. The only problem is that we're not doing them.
Have you seen any results of anything? And I haven't had a chance to read your book, and I'm so sorry. I've looked through it. The Healing of America by Marianne Williamson. It is fabulous. The parts I've been reading, those of you in recovery will be able to relate, and those of you that want to be more politically active and make a difference in our lives here in America. Have you seen things that have happened for yourself? And
one of the things that I talk about in the book is when I was involved, maybe you were, I don't know if you heard about it, back in 1995, we did a 30-day vigil for stopping the war in Bosnia. It was an extraordinary experience. Thousands of people were involved around the world, here in the United States and abroad. And it was an amazing demonstration of spiritual power that those of us who participated feel very clear was a serious contribution to the interruption of the power of atrocity, the atrocities being committed at that time.
This reminds me of the Golden Dawn Society, which was a meditation group in England during, and there was an offshoot of that I was a member of for a while during World War II.
And they used to stop every night for a minute of silence, didn't they? Was it a minute or 2 minutes of silence during the bombing of Britain? I can't remember which.
And then they also did these very intense rituals and visualizations, absolutely incredible.
Well, World War II was basically a metaphysical war. I mean, the forces of light and the forces of darkness were very active.
Boy.
And Hitler and his minions were very involved in black magic and satanic ritual. In fact, Churchill knew this and made a conscious decision. The English are always hipper to this stuff, actually, because they're the sort of home of metaphysics. And Churchill made the decision not to mention that during the Nuremberg trials because he felt that we weren't, as a human race, sort of ready to handle the information.
That's horrible. I can't believe it. Well, the woman who leads this meditation group is from England, and she was a student of the woman who founded the Golden Dawn Society. So she did a lot of talking about that and did a lot of rituals around politics and just beautiful visualizations.
I have a lot of prayers in my book, prayers for America, and also prayers of atonement so that white America can atone to Native Americans and African Americans. That's a major part of it, prayer vigil for the United States. I call it yin activism. You know, holistic politics, in medicine we now know that it's not just the medicine that the doctor gives you, but the thoughts, the feelings, and the spirituality of the patient that matter. In politics, it's the same. It's not just government officials and legislation that matter. It's the citizens' thoughts, the citizens' feelings, and the citizens' prayers. That's what's going to uplift this country and heal it, I think.
Something about the word citizen, every time you say it, it feels so primal and to this part of my heart that it's like, yeah, I'm a citizen.
That's
I'm
right.
A citizen.
When Harry Truman was no longer in the White House, they said, how does it feel? A reporter asked him, how does it feel no longer being president? And he said, I've been given a better job, Mr. Citizen.
That's wonderful.
When you exercise it, it feels good. It feels empowering.
When you think of it, I'm a citizen.
That's right.
We are citizens, and we don't even do it.
And also, when you were talking before about I have loving ideas, but I feel I'll be mocked. If somebody says to you, who are you to express an opinion about politics? Or who are you? What's your credibility? All you have to say is, I'm an American citizen.
That's beautiful. That's so true. It's wonderful. Well, I just love this show and love learning for myself more of what my next journey is about, and that is really embracing and moving on instead of just sitting here enjoying, the growth from my own journey. It is time to do a 12-step. Those of you that are familiar with the 12-step, which is, like Marianne said, taking it beyond ourselves and beyond the other people who are suffering and moving out into our community. So I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's been very wonderful. And you were listening to Marianne Williamson. Her new book, The Healing of America, is out now, and it is published by Simon & Schuster. I highly recommend it. This has been Choosing Life. Addiction and Recovery. The show is a public service of WSB 98.5 FM. Remember, you can call 404-897-7400, extension 2203. That's 404-897-7400, extension 2203. Don't forget to try and not take yourself too seriously and put the fun back in dysfunctional.